In the end, it worked after all. In the concept we proposed,
Here in HafenCity, there was a call for tenders in 2017, and Baugruppe approached us and said, "We would like to apply for it."
Die Gruppe kenne ich schon seit 2014.
I've known the group since 2014. They had formed from the community around FC St. Pauli, from the professional handball division.
And this organization of sports enthusiasts here in this building was also meant to have an impact on the neighborhood.
In dem Konzept war halt eines der wesentlichen Bausteine, dass sie
One of the key components of the concept was that they would found a new club for the new Baakenhafen district.
und das wurde auch seitens der Stadt in den
And that was also supported by the city in the contracts to ensure that this concept would later be implemented. And by now, since the baugruppe already lives in the building, sports activities are already being offered within the neighborhood.
Ende 2017.
The application was then submitted at the end of 2017. And 2 years later, 2 years of waiting, they were awarded the project.
Und dann hat die Gruppe im Grunde
Baugruppe then received the assignment to start the project and to announce a so-called architectural competition.
This sporting idea, this team play, was actually for us the central idea that guided our design approach. The flats are designed like a playing field, and then the boundaries were shifted. There were control rooms on this playing field that could be assigned to one team or the other.
Im Endeffekt hat das Konzept
In the end, the concept already stood out in the competition for its uniqueness. Translating it into the floor plans meant creating both introverted and extroverted layouts. 2 floor plan variants, which the building parties could choose from. And on the other hand, certainly also that it wasn't a brick facade, but a ceramic facade.
Various ceramic tiles were combined here. In the plinth area, we have used standard straight tiles, and from the first floor upwards the tiles were slightly tilted. The tilt of these tiles creates an effect.
Die Sonneneinstrahlung, je nachdem, welche Jahreszeit, welche Tageszeit.
The solar radiation, depending on the season, the time of day, the sky conditions, actually varies from very, very bright to white to shades of grey to glittering surfaces which turn to gold when the sun sets. And that is then as a tribute to the water of Hamburg, which can be seen everywhere. And it also has something of a glittering water surface about it. The flats have 2 ground plan characters. We have called one of them offensive and the other one defensive. And these 2 very different ground plans or ground plan conceptions work by placing the living spaces as public areas within the flat in different positions. In the offensive layout, it is here in the entrance area. In the defensive layout, it is located at the very back of the flat.
ein Baugemeinschaftsprinzip.
A building concept naturally thrives from the individualization of the respective residential units. Nevertheless, it still requires a framework and certain guidelines so that 40 freehold flats are not each designed completely differently. And this concept has reflected that very well.
we followed the design so precisely that some flats were changed and placed in different locations, unlike what we had planned initially.
Interessanterweise hat sich
And
auch
interestingly, this concept is also reflected in the facade.
The Baugruppe itself has, through the choice of offensive and defensive flat types, contributed directly to the design. Ultimately, they determined the design.
Auch die Stadt hat an der Stelle ein Mitspracherecht gehabt und tatsächlich
The city also had a say in the process and was regularly updated about the design status.
denn gerade Hamburg
Because Hamburg in particular takes a lot of influence on how buildings are created and how they appear externally.
und letzten Endes hat die Stadt dem Prinzip der
In
Entwicklung
the end,
auch
the city supported the principle of development, agreeing that the facade developed from the inside out through the ground plans.
The first 2 floors were built entirely in reinforced concrete. The load on the external wall is particularly high because of the facade's articulated design, projecting balconies, windows in varying positions, openings of different sizes, all required adaptation in the structural analysis. From the second upper floor upwards, construction switched to calcium silicate masonry wherever possible.
So both facade systems, EWIS and RSC, were involved, and the main reason was the exceeding of the building boundary, which subsequently led to the EWI system, because ARSC facade requires a little more space in the construction depth.
The rain screen cladding facade is typically used for large panel cladding, and during the design process, or even in the initial design ideas, it was already that the format of the ceramics would be relatively small and more closely resembled the clinker format of the surrounding area. These smaller formats could then be implemented within the external wall insulation system.
We have mineral wool in 240 millimeter thickness, which is then reinforced and finished with ceramic claddings. Actually, it should meet fire protection requirements and it should comply with the Blue Angel certificate, and this is what we have achieved with it.
The insulation system is equally suitable for reinforced concrete and calcium silicate masonry substrates. This could then be applied across the entire facade. And the advantage for us was a faster construction process and a slightly better use of the space.
And a very important aspect, of course, is the facade cladding with ceramic tiles. In the plinth area, these are smooth standard tiles. In the upper areas, however, specially designed angled tiles were developed, tilted against one another.
The basic idea was, by using a shard, hat is a ceramic element in a small format, to achieve as much design effect as possible.
The shape, the color, you have to feel it and you have to hold it in your hand.
Basically, you do this with wood samples. You create a tool drawing, produce wood samples, in sufficient quantity per shard, about 10 to 15 pieces.
Da waren Hohlkehlen dabei, da waren gewölbte Fliesen dabei.
There were fillets, there were curved tiles, there were formats with high points, there were also larger formats and smaller ones. In the end, we aimed for a subtle play of light and shadow across the facade. Ultimately chose the simplest version with one tilt.
Es handelt sich ein und dieselbe Fliese, die wir nur.
It is the same tile throughout, only rotated by 180 degrees. So most of the ceramics share one format and shape.
Wir haben uns dafür dann auch Spielregeln überlegt, die dann die armen Handwerker mühsam.
We established installation rules that the craftsmen had to follow precisely. They had to count the tiles before rotating one.
Es dürfen keine.
No stairs were allowed to occur. There must be a maximum of 5 of one type, and then no more than 1 of another variety may be added. These rules we have, as I said, developed on the computer and precisely specified.
There was actually a proper installation plan from the architect, and it was necessary to pay close attention that these schemes are followed precisely, because otherwise duplications or visible irregularities will suddenly appear in transitional areas.
That was the challenge. The bricklayers had to internalize that.
I heard very often, that's impossible. So in particular, the straight continuous joint was a major challenge. We have permissible construction tolerances, which are unavoidable, and we had to plan them to the millimeter. The wall can have a tolerance here, then comes the insulation system, which can also have a tolerance in itself. The window can be placed either here or there. This also meant that the window manufacturer couldn't orient the position of his windows by the top opening, but according to a site dimension. So we had to place the windows above each other accurate to the millimeter. They weren't allowed to stagger, to create continuous lines. The window alignment was the biggest challenge, along with the distribution across the facade, considering unavoidable residual dimensions.
In the end, it is a zero-tolerance system. Every millimeter lost anywhere will take its toll somewhere else. Ultimately, every joint was plumb-lined from bottom to top.
We aligned them vertically, using cords or steel wires for the corners.
If you look at the pillar now, I think there are 8 tiles. If we had been off by a millimeter with each tile, then we would have ended up with almost 1 centimeter. It shows how important it was to check with every tile. Am I on the grid?
It worked very well thanks above all to the installers on site. Across the full width of the facade, for example, 13 meters along one side, they had to adjust the joint dimension so that everything lined up perfectly at the windows and building corners.
You can clearly see that every window reveal, every lintel area, always ends with a stack bond.
Another challenge was finding an expansion joint made of a different material that would fit in seamlessly and remain discreet.
Of course, no one wants a visible joint, especially on a facade, that plays with reflections. It would disturb the entire image. Otherwise, you would end up with a checkerboard pattern.
These joints are specified in the approval to absorb expansion of the facade, avoid shear forces, etc.
Here is the sanded PU joint. The material is applied with a syringe, and then the quartz sand is dusted over it. That's it.
It's very difficult to get the surface exactly right, because the scattering gives the surface the same appearance as a trowel-pointed joint.
We are very pleased that all the effort paid off in the end. That long process of sampling reflection and testing, it required patience and persistence.
And you can see in the project that someone put their heart and soul into it.
Interfaces had to communicate cleanly and not to fall into a state of inertia and only see their own advantage. Everyone needed to understand how interdependent the processes were in order to prevent conflicts that could no longer be remedied. And that worked extremely well here.
Through
the light reflections at different times of day, the facade has become a very strong identification value and an eye-catcher.
At sunset, the tiles glow in golden, glittering tones.
Those are wonderful moments when you see that it works, and it works even better than we had imagined.